morning. Thank you for rising early and being here with us. I'm happy to announce or to introduce two great panelists who have some experience that I hope we can all learn from. The first is Secretary Maldonado, who is the Chief of Staff and Chief Financial Officer to the Governor of Puerto Rico. He was a principal leader in the recovery of Puerto Rico after the twin hurricanes of Irma and Maria. And he has also been a principal part of the reconstruction of Puerto Rico and building it back more resilient. Second, I'd really like to introduce Mr. Karim El-Gendi, who's a senior sustainability consultant who's been working all over the Middle East with cities who are facing imminent threats as a result of climate change, other sources of stresses and shocks. And we're going to learn from him what the Middle East cities are doing, what's working, what's not working, and how he's looking at it, which I think is a really interesting perspective. In September of 2017, the twin hurricanes of Irma and Maria hit the island of Puerto Rico and devastated most of the infrastructure. Tens of thousands were left without homes, no access to electricity, clean water, sanitation. Debris and about 41,000 landslides closed all but 400 miles of roads. So people were cut off and isolated across the island. And we have just a short clip to tell you or to show you what that looked like. So this was the situation when Secretary Maldonado started the response to this disaster.
We were hit first by Irma. A couple of days after that, we were hit by Maria, which is the biggest hurricane in U.S. history, Category 5. It was a terrible disaster for Puerto Rico. However, we received a lot of first responders from the National Guard of several states. It was a great service because we were able to provide food, shelter, and essential services to people that were in need in that moment. It has been a tough process. However, with the assistance of the funds received from the Congress and from the assistance from several of the states, in combination with the resilience of the people of Puerto Rico, we are happy to say that we are on the right path to recovery.
Great. So Secretary Maldonado, what was it, the characteristics of Puerto Rico, that caused it to be so vulnerable when hurricanes Irma and Maria hit?
I think that the easier answer is to say that our infrastructure didn't have the maintenance necessary. But if we took a deep dive, there's a couple of reasons that really comes across. Is that Puerto Rico is under a financial crisis. We have a small debt of $70 billion that we own on municipal debts. The Congress assigned a fiscal oversight board, the name is PROMESA, to supervise the financial situation in Puerto Rico. That means that we cannot spend money without their authorization. And obviously, the main interest is to pay the bondholders. So there was a lack of funds assigned to the infrastructure. Also, it was a mistake that we made during the last 20 years. We didn't have a comprehensive urban planning structure for Puerto Rico. Everything was designed toward the manufacturing sector because that was our greatest industry. And it was 50% of our national GNP. So we abandoned the communities and we abandoned the rest of the industry and we concentrate in one industry. By concentrating in one industry, we get hit very hard by the hurricanes, so we lost 50% of our revenues. Mm-hmm. Also, we have like a non-diversified economy in Puerto Rico, so it was almost everything was manufacturing. The other issue that we have is that we have a lack of supplies and inventory. So when the hurricane hit, we didn't have the resources to rebuild immediately. So that was a mistake that we made in our tax situation because we got this funny tax that we tax the inventory and we are an island. So what did the merchant did? The merchant have a very small amount of inventory so they don't get taxed. That was a huge mistake that we made and we are correcting that right now.
Mm. Interesting. So often what we find in the midst of a recovery or the immediate response to a disaster, decisions that are made to sort of put cities or regions on a trajectory to what happens later when they start to rebuild and whether they build it back better more resilient, or whether they repeat some of the same mistakes. Looking back, were there key points or key decisions that were made in the early days of their response that put you on a different trajectory in terms of how you're recovering now?
Yes, absolutely. Let me give you a little secret. It's like a hidden agenda. We got a country that was devastated completely, so it's like having a blank canvas. You really can make a social and financial experiment by changing everything that you have done on the wrong way before that. In Puerto Rico, most of the decisions in the past, they were done from a financial perspective. There was no community involved there. So what I'm trying to do is combining the community, the involvement with the financial situation. So every dollar that we spend right now is like, we measure the financial return on investment, but we also have to measure what is the increase in the quality of life. The way that we did that is by creating like a strategic alliance between the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. Local and international nonprofit organizations helped me in developing this. So it was a way to change the way the government was doing business, because everything before that was, let's make some money, pay the bondholders, and let's build all these big buildings. So it seems that we are in a good economic path without considering the effect on the communities. Mm-hmm. So now it's like a social and financial experiment that we are doing.
And how's it going so far?
It's doing great.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with that, yeah.
All right. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Karim, you've been working with cities across the Middle East. How do the stresses and shocks that they're experiencing, the vulnerabilities that you see them grappling with, compare to what Puerto Rico grapples with?
They're very different. So the Middle East, the cities in the Middle East of North Africa tend to deal more with chronic stresses. So resilience is the ability to survive, adapt to, and sort of grow against those shocks and stresses. Some of them are acute, some of them are sort of chronic and long-term. Cities of the Middle East and North Africa are of the latter type. They deal with chronic stresses, and there is no shortage of those stresses and vulnerability as well. So not to say that there are no shocks. There are still shocks. So the region is very coastal. All the cities, most of the cities are coastal, and as a result, they're more susceptible to water-related shocks. There's also dust storms, sandstorms, heat shocks as well. But on the whole, it's mostly about chronic stresses, and these stresses range from water insecurity, food insecurity, and in some cities it's also energy insecurity as well. And then we have vulnerabilities relating to lack of diversification. So cities are dependent on one or two sources of energy for their energy system, one or two sources of water for their water system, one mobility mode of transportation, and these are weaker points. They're vulnerabilities, serious vulnerabilities for these cities. It puts them at great susceptibility for any kind of disruption to the system. It will cause a wide-scale vulnerability to the entire operation of the city. And then we have also dependencies. We have structural dependencies between, say, energy and water. There's a very distorted water, energy, food nexus in the Middle East, where energy is used to prop up other systems. So you see that in desalination. We also see that in the imports of food as a source of virtual water as well. There's large informalities which are more susceptible, and there's lack of stormwater and flooding infrastructure as well. Even in cities, that creates additional flooding risk, even in cities which are not historically, so for example, Muscat and Jeddah are historically prone to flooding just because of the way the geography works, and also the way they have become more impermeable as they grew. But also in new cities such as Doha and Kuwait, which have both recently flooded because of 70 millimeters of rainfall over the last 2 months. So the stresses are very different in terms of what Puerto Rico has experienced. Because of that, it doesn't give you the opportunity to build back better as in the same way. It's kind of the constant retrofit process, but it gives you a little bit of time to prepare as well.
So you've been using an approach, a framework that you call sort of addressing the urban systems, and then looking for the synergies between urban systems and how you can capitalize and leverage those. Could you tell us, first of all, what do you mean by that, this framework? And second, can you give us some examples of specific cities how they're applying it, and what kind of results they're getting.
Sure.
So which governments are doing things better, and with what effect?
Okay, so the framework is basically, so I believe that urban resilience goes hand in hand with urban sustainability, and you cannot really make any serious decision on any of the urban systems or in the environment without considering both of them. For example, in Beirut, energy insecurity is so serious that we cannot make any decision about energy efficiency without considering energy insecurity at the same time, while making the same decision about the energy network. Likewise with Doha, which has 3 days of storage of water, you can't make any decision about water efficiency without considering water security. All the mobility networks are not reliable, to put it mildly, and as a result, any moves to diversify or to move towards more sustainable transportation modes also needs to consider the reliability of those systems at the same time. So that is where this all started. They have to go hand in hand. And if they are to go hand in hand, as we consider that, we have to look at both the sustainability and resilience needs of within one system, but also synergies across multiple systems. Where would we better put our investments to get multiple benefits across sustainability and resilience, but also across multiple urban systems? For example, I would propose within the same system diversification into more renewable sources and modes. For example, that would achieve both resilience, urban resilience, and urban sustainability. So, for example, diversifying towards renewable energy sources not only improves your sustainability, reduces your carbon emissions, but also means that if your main power plants that all run on gas fail for whatever reason, you've got something else that you don't have total failure. Likewise, with reducing your demand, it works in the opposite direction from sustainability, but also towards providing resilience benefits as well. But within multiple systems, with that framework, has managed to identify multiple points where intervening can have multiple benefits. For example, green infrastructure has multiple benefits across multiple systems. Urban agriculture has multiple benefits. Densification generally has multiple benefits. So, yeah.
What is a city like Amman doing well? I know they're particularly progressive. What are they doing to tackle their multiple stresses?
So Amman has plenty of problems. It has serious issues with shortages of water, energy, and food, but they're doing a lot. So, for example, they have a good energy management plan. On their energy management plan, they have managed to, through regulation, mandate rooftop solar thermal on every house above a certain size, or every property above a certain size. I think at the moment they're around 12% north of 12% of all properties have solar thermal. They've managed through legislation, through and improving the legal and market framework, to improve their environment for utility scale renewables. So wind and solar, there's a healthy pipeline of wind and solar photovoltaics in Jordan as well, and that's due to net metering legislation and feed-in tariffs that have been introduced as well. On the water management, they have a good water management plan as well. They have managed to reduce their demand for existing neighborhoods by about 20%, and in new neighborhoods by about 40%, which is great for an existing area and for new areas as well. That's using, I don't know how much time we have, but they've deployed a bunch of a range of measures, ranging from education and outreach to regulation to improving technology use to achieve these targets on the domestic front. And also, just as a quick anecdote, today an average resident of Amman uses half as much water per capita as an average resident of Cairo. Both of them have exactly the same economic output on a GDP per capita basis, which says something about the benefits of energy efficiency and water efficiency and its decoupling from economic growth. Amman also does a few other things. It has this interesting Red Sea, Dead Sea conveyor, which will aim not only to provide fresh water, but also to replenish the Dead Sea with the brine output from that process. It's experimenting with Sahara Forest Project, which is a pilot food security program in the south. If we have more time, we can get to that. So there's plenty going on in Amman.
Wow, small but mighty country. I'm smiling at my colleague Kathleen Odell, who did a lot of the work with the government of Jordan on the energy side. So we only, excuse me, we only have a few minutes left, but I really want to ask the Secretary. Speaking of, thank you very much. Thank you. I really want to ask the Secretary. You've done some really interesting work around structuring financial mechanisms and financial instruments to help rebuild Puerto Rico. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what's working, and what kind of impact you've had with these innovative forms of financing?
Yes, absolutely. Right now we have a very interesting investment vehicle. Yesterday, in one of the conferences, they talk about opportunity zones, which is the new legislation on by the Federal Congress. We are using the opportunity zone legislation and combining that with tax incentives in Puerto Rico. That means that any foreign investor that comes to Puerto Rico, we have the tax benefit in the United States, plus also have additional tax benefit in Puerto Rico. At the end of the day, what that means for the Wall Street guys is that the return on investment in Puerto Rico is twice or 3 times the amount of the return on investment in the mainland. So what we have right now is $80 billion from the federal government that are coming to Puerto Rico. I already believe that I can raise close to $40 billion in the private sector, so it's a $120 billion investment. When you are a developer, for example, I got a developer that wants to build up new schools in Puerto Rico. So the cost for the developer is usually between 20 to 40% is demolition and the foundation. That cost right now is zero because I am doing that with CBDB money funds, with federal funds. So they are very interested in going to Puerto Rico to do that. Another interesting vehicle that we are using is what is known in the US as a real estate investment trust, a REIT. I am combining all the properties that the government owns in Puerto Rico that they are backing. I am putting them on a trust. I am selling participations to investors. So they are, it's a very popular investment. It's a good vehicle. And when you have that on communities that really need investment, the private sector really will go for that.
And where are you in the cycle? Are these just being formed? Where are they in the maturity of the use of these financing instruments?
Right now, we already raised close to $600 million last week in private investment. So between now and half of the next year, we should have the whole amount of the private sector invested in Puerto Rico.
And you're identifying projects for the pipeline and starting to think about what your priorities are?
Yes, but that, as a matter of fact, Deloitte is helping me on that because we are drafting like a new blueprint for Puerto Rico because if we are going to receive $120 billion, we better have Puerto Rico should become the Singapore of the Caribbean. So we need to have a country that have a sustainable economic development. And this $120 billion can allow us to change the landscape in Puerto Rico, not only in the financial side, also on the social side, because we got a huge difference between people with more money and people with less money. So it's right now we need to close that bridge.
Secretary Maldonado, Karim El-Guindi, thank you very much. They'll be here all day. So we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.